Let's get more on this now with Dalia Fahmy, who joins us from New York. Hello, Dalia. Great to have you. Is the outcome of this election a foregone conclusion, do you think?
Absolutely. It's been a foregone conclusion for quite some time. President Sisi has not really allowed for any opposition to form. If you remember what's happened in the past couple of weeks since candidates were able to start registering, and they had a really short window to do that, he's arrested those who attempted to run for office or forced their withdrawal from candidacy. And so the only candidate that exists today is someone who is not just unknown to the population, but is someone who is a Sisi supporter who says that he indeed will be president again. And so, of course, the elections are a foregone conclusion, but I think more difficult is to take a step back and remember what are the political conditions in Egypt today. Since President Sisi has come into office, the number of political prisoners has exploded to 60,000. He has had to build 16 more prisoners. We have seen a crackdown on not just reformists, but also on journalists. Today, there are 18 journalists in prison. There have been the disappearance of 240 individuals. There are 830 torture cases. There have been the closure of NGOs, the shutdown and blocking of 434 news media websites. And we just saw a few days ago the extradition or the forced extradition of a BBC journalist who had been reporting from Egypt for quite some time. So this political climate that doesn't really allow for opposition, doesn't allow for free press, means that the president is trying to consolidate power around himself in these moments in the run-up to the election.
Right, Dalia, if the outcome is pretty much a foregone conclusion, will the turnout give us an insight into the government's level of support?
So turnout in Egypt is historically very interesting. In the last election, we saw 23 million people come out for the vote out of a population of about 93 million. And so while that's a small segment, we have to ask ourselves, what is the nature of voting? Now, Egypt has had a history of not just ballot stuffing, but also of public employees being bussed and forced to vote for the candidate. So it's not clear that not only are these free and fair, in terms of turnout and vote count, we see that this is one of the first elections in Egypt's modern history where there is not independent review or foreign independent review of the elections, which many, for example, here in the United States, we have two senators, Senator Menendez and Senator Rubio, just put out a nonpartisan statement on Friday calling for these elections not just to be free and fair, but also to be monitored. And so what we're seeing is not only is this going to be a foregone conclusion, but the international independent election monitoring also does not exist in this election.
Dalia, earlier we mentioned the rather difficult economic conditions in Egypt. How are they playing in this election?
So President Sisi ran on a platform of populism, and this populism is really in the vision of "I am your savior." He actually does not have a political platform. There weren't any documents circulated historically, no matter what they've been. We've had a political platform to look at. Now, the economic conditions, since he floated the currency a couple of years ago, inflation rates are about 30%. There are some places where unemployment is 11%, and some places where unemployment is in the 70s. 2/3 of the Egyptian population is under the age of 29. And when you look at the poverty rates, 51% of Egyptians live under $1.80 a day. The basic goods are unaffordable. And so if you look at the kind of economic climate, it leads to a level of stagnation and degradation where the president is going to have to do something for this young population. Historically in Egypt, if you were a high school graduate in the early 80s, you had about 70% chance of getting a job. Today, if you're a college graduate, you have a 23% chance of getting a job. And so with those kinds of economic conditions and the clampdown on the political atmosphere, what you have is a population that is more disgruntled than the population that actually led the 2011 revolution. And so what the president has to ask himself is, if I want to stay in power, will I allow for some political and economic openness that gives the young people a future, or will I continue this and look at what could possibly happen, which is an increase in violence, an increase in degradation of the economy, but more so an increase in apathy of the population.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Dalia Fahmy in New York, thank you very much indeed.